we have some questions that are coming in from the different schools out there who are watching Pollinator Live. So let's see what they have to ask. Thank you very much. Now, this first question is from third graders at Christ the King Catholic School in Chicago, from Mrs. Sullivan and Mrs. Foreman's classes. They say, you talked about what would happen if we don't have pollinators for our crops. Could you expand on what effect that will have on our food supply?
I'll take that question. Actually, what happens is any system that is in place and you remove parts of it, then that system begins to collapse. So when you hear about oranges in Florida that don't produce because of cold, it's not actually something that physically happens to the plant. It is a matter of the yield of the pollination. The pollinators don't really fly when it's so cold, and as a result you don't get as much oranges and the price goes up, and it has all kinds of cascading effects.
Thank you very much. Now, this next question is from Mrs. Guichard's class at Mountain View Elementary in Haymarket, Virginia. Their question is, how can a tiny pollen grain make a long tube during fertilization?
Actually, the pollen grain is actually an active cell. So when it actually gets to where it has to be, it gets stimulated to start growing. And when it starts growing that long tube, it gets where it needs to be. That's actually when fertilization takes place. So the pollen grain is actually alive, and it has to get where it's going really fast. Remember I said it can only live a few hours to a few weeks. So depending on the pollen grain, it's got to get where it's going so it can start growing and do what it has to do.
Thank you. Now, we have some more questions. Thank you very much. All right, here's one from Farmington High School in Farmington, New Mexico. Their question is, can we attract pollinators without scaring people about being stung?
Yeah, we can. For the most part, most people think of the big stingers, which actually end up being wasps. Most bees are really about getting food and feeding their offspring. So they don't really care about us. They've got a mission. They need to feed their babies, and they get off doing that, and they do it pretty well. The wasps are the ones that are a little more aggressive. They've got to get a job done, but they have a big hive to go take care of, and they're not as friendly as bees are. But for the most part, if you're looking at your flowers and plants, you're seeing a lot of bees hanging around, and they don't want anything to do with us. They just want to do their jobs and keep on going.
Thank you very much, Donna. And another question from Mrs. G's class at Mountain View Elementary in Haymarket, Virginia. So, does water or rain ruin pollination?
Not always. Sometimes water can actually help pollen get where it needs to go. However, for us, it helps us because we can breathe better when all the pollen is knocked down on the ground. So it doesn't ruin it. It can actually stimulate the trees. When the trees absorb the water in the ground, they feel healthier. And sometimes that next day after the rain, we get a lot more pollen than we actually want to see. So it's actually good for the trees when it gets watered.
Great, thank you. Now we have one more question from Nottingham Elementary in Arlington, Virginia. How many different types of pollen are there?
Well, remember I said there's about 400,000 species of flowering plants. So probably around that, and many different more. And each plant's pollen, sometimes they look really similar, but sometimes they can be very different. So there's 400,000 types of pollen, or different types of pollen, but actually some of them share a common shape and size.
And for our last question, Ms. Goss' class at Mountain View Haymarket, Virginia asks, what would happen if bees and other insects weren't able to pollinate?
Well, one thing that would happen is, as we talked about, we wouldn't have the fruits and vegetables that are available to us. It would affect the honey that is available. It would be all kinds of things that we need to have to survive.
Yeah.
It's really important, all of this pollination and how we can help pollinators. And so we thank all of the schools out there for asking these questions, and we want you to keep on buzzing in to continue to send in those questions. So now it's time to wrap up this segment, and we thank all of you for being here and helping us out with that question and answer.